The emergency lights flickered in the council chamber as representatives from across the galaxy gathered in confusion. Something impossible had happened. Humanity had vanished. Ambassador Haiyan Wu stood before the massive viewing screen, his hands trembling slightly as he read the reports. Every human colony, every station, every outpost empty. Not abandoned in panic, but methodically evacuated. The humans had left in perfect order, taking everything with them. The Vrin representative clicked her mandibles in agitation. Her species resembled giant mantises, and right now her body language screamed distress. The Multhar ambassador floated in his water tank, his tentacles writhing. The Keth delegate remained still, but his crystalline body pulsed with anxious colors. Haiyan Wu had been chosen to investigate because his family had worked closely with humans for 2 generations. His grandfather had called them friends. Now he walked through the empty Earth embassy, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Everything was clean. Too clean. The humans had scrubbed every surface, removed every piece of technology, every document, every personal item. It was as if they had never been there at all. The only thing remaining was a small data chip on the main desk, sitting in a pool of light from the window. He picked it up with shaking hands and inserted it into his reader. The message was simple and formal. Humanity was withdrawing from all treaties with the Galactic Council. They were exercising their right to terminate membership, as outlined in Section 47 of the Council Charter. They thanked the Council for 70 years of cooperation. That was all. No explanation. No anger. No emotion whatsoever. Haiyan Wu felt a chill run down his spine. He had expected rage, accusations, demands. This cold professionalism was somehow worse. He contacted the Council immediately. Within hours, representatives were checking other human facilities. The story was the same everywhere. New Beijing, empty. Nova Sol, empty. The massive shipyards at Proxima, completely stripped. The humans had taken everything that was theirs and left behind everything that belonged to others, down to the smallest detail. The Keth ambassador made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the Council. The humans had also withdrawn from all their military positions. For 30 years, human fleets had guarded the Outer Rim, protecting the Council's territory from pirates and raiders. Those positions were now vacant. Haiyan Wu began digging through old records, looking for clues. What had caused this? There had been no crisis, no incident, no breaking point that anyone could identify. Relations with humanity had seemed normal, peaceful even. But as he went deeper into the files, a pattern emerged. It was subtle, so subtle that no one had noticed. 5 years ago, humans had stopped bidding on new construction projects. 4 years ago, they had begun declining to renew certain trade contracts. 3 years ago, their diplomatic corps had started rotating people home without sending replacements. The signs had been there all along. Humanity had been planning this for years, moving so carefully and quietly that no one had paid attention. The Council had been too focused on their own internal politics, their own squabbles over resources and territory. Haiyan Wu called an emergency meeting. The Council chamber was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all demanding answers he did not have. The Vrin Commerce Minister spoke first, her voice sharp. This is disaster. The humans control major trade routes. Their absence will cost us billions. The Multhar Defense Coordinator added, our borders are now vulnerable. The human fleet was our first line of defense against threats. We must mobilize our forces immediately. The Keth Research Director's crystalline voice chimed in. The humans built most of our communications infrastructure. Who will maintain it now? Haiyan Wu listened to them all and slowly realized something terrible. No one was asking why the humans left. They were only concerned with what the humans had done for them, what services were no longer available. They spoke of humanity like a utility that had stopped working, not as people who had made a choice. He pulled up the deployment records for the Outer Rim. Human ships had been stationed there for 3 decades, far from their own worlds, protecting Council space. They had rotated crews every 6 months, maintained constant vigilance, engaged pirates in dozens of small battles. They had lost ships and lives doing this. Had the Council ever thanked them? He searched the records. There were official acknowledgments, formal recognitions, ceremonial medals, but no real gratitude, no recognition of the sacrifice involved in keeping people so far from home for so long. Haiyan Wu stood up and addressed the Council. We need to understand what happened. This was not sudden. The humans planned this carefully. Something made them want to leave. We need to find out what. The Vrin ambassador waved a claw dismissively. What does it matter? They are gone. We must focus on practical concerns. We need to find replacements for their services, renegotiate trade agreements, secure our borders. But Haiyan Wu could not shake the feeling that they were missing something important. He looked at the faces around him, saw the irritation and inconvenience in their expressions. No one looked sad. No one seemed to feel they had lost friends or valued partners. They had lost useful servants, and they were annoyed about it. That night, alone in his quarters, Haiyan Wu stared at the data chip again. He read the formal withdrawal notice over and over, looking for hidden messages, coded meanings. There was nothing. Just polite, professional language. The silence was the message. After 70 years together, the humans had left without a word of true explanation. That spoke louder than any accusation could have. 3 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was learning what their absence truly meant. The first pirate attack came on a Tuesday. A merchant convoy traveling through the Outer Rim was ambushed by raiders. In the past, human patrol ships would have responded within minutes. Their fast frigates had been everywhere, always watching, always ready. Now the convoy sent distress calls that echoed into empty space. By the time Council security forces arrived, 6 ships had been destroyed and 2 more captured. 15 crew members were dead. The pirates had escaped. Haiyan Wu read the report with growing dread. This was just the beginning. Over the next month, pirate attacks increased by 300%. Trade ships began refusing to travel certain routes. Insurance companies raised their rates so high that smaller merchants could not afford them. The economy of the Outer Rim, which had been peaceful and prosperous for decades, began to collapse. The Council Defense Committee held emergency meetings. They deployed their own fleets to patrol the area, but quickly discovered a problem. The human ships had been designed for this work-fast, efficient, with crews trained specifically for anti-piracy operations. Council vessels were slower, less coordinated. They consumed more fuel and required larger support staffs. Worse, the humans had developed tactics over 30 years of experience. They had known where pirates hid, how they operated, what routes they preferred. The Council was starting from nothing, and pirates were taking full advantage. Haiyan, the Council's chief economist, presented his analysis to the full assembly. The numbers were devastating. The humans were subsidizing our operations, he said, his voice quiet in the shocked silence. We thought we were paying fair market rates for their services, but we were not. They charged us barely enough to cover materials and basic labor. A human communications engineer cost us 30,000 credits per year. To hire a Keth engineer with similar skills cost 90,000 credits. He pulled up more data. The jump gate system requires constant maintenance. The humans did this work for what we thought was a reasonable fee. I have now consulted with independent contractors. To maintain the gates at current operational levels will cost us 8 times what we were paying humans. The Melford Trade Minister's tank bubbled with agitation. Why would they charge us so little? It makes no sense. Haiyan looked tired. I believe they considered it their contribution to the council. They thought they were being good members, good partners. They took the financial loss because they valued being part of our community. The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to acknowledge what that implied about how the council had treated that generosity. G-Wu, a young analyst, made another discovery while reviewing historical records. She found a file marked Kepler Plague Aid Request Denied. Her hand shook as she opened it. 15 years ago, a plague had swept through 3 human colonies. 2 million people had become sick. The humans had requested emergency medical assistance from the council. They had needed medicine, hospital ships, medical personnel. They had made formal requests through all proper channels. The council had held meetings. Committees had been formed. The Vryn had argued that their own medical supplies were limited. The Keth had said their doctors were not trained for human physiology. The Melthara had cited regulations about resource allocation during times of budget constraints. After 2 weeks of debate, the council had sent a formal statement of sympathy and concern. They had offered thoughts and prayers. They had sent no medicine, no doctors, no supplies. 2 million humans had died. 1 in 4 had been children. G-Wu found another file. In the prior decade, the council had experienced 17 separate emergencies. Earthquakes on Vris Prime, reactor failure on the Keth homeworld, asteroid impact on Melthara Colony 7, plague outbreak on Deneb Station. Humans have responded to every single one. They had sent ships, supplies, personnel, and money. They had never hesitated, never debated, never formed committees to study the issue. They had just helped. She presented this information to Haiyan Wu, who stared at the files for a long time. Did anyone ever thank them? He asked quietly. Ji-Wu checked the records. There were official acknowledgments, formal certificates of appreciation. But no, nothing more than that. The situation continued to deteriorate. The jump gates began experiencing malfunctions. Small ones at first, a gate that took an extra hour to charge, another that required multiple attempts to establish a stable connection. Then bigger problems emerged. The gate at Sirius failed completely, shutting down for 3 days. Dozens of ships were stranded, forced to take slower routes that added weeks to their journeys. The council sent their best engineers, but the human-built systems were incredibly complex. The documentation was thorough, but understanding the theory was different from having the practical experience to fix things quickly. The Vryn Commerce Minister's prediction had been correct. Their economy was suffering badly. For 50 years, Vryn artists had sold their work throughout human space. Humans had loved Vryn culture, their music and art and literature. They had paid premium prices, considering Vryn craftsmanship worth the cost. That market had represented 40% of Vryn exports. Now it was gone. Vryn unemployment rose. Factories closed. The Vryn government faced protests and riots. In the council chamber, accusations flew. The Melthara blamed the Vryn for exploiting human labor with unfair trade practices. The Vryn accused the Keth of blocking human reform proposals out of jealousy. The Keth claimed everyone had benefited from human generosity, so everyone was responsible. Haiyan Wu watched the fighting and felt sick. They still did not understand. They were arguing about economics and politics, about who was to blame. No one was talking about the humans as people, as partners who had deserved better. He remembered his grandfather's stories about working with humans. The old man had spoken of their dedication, their willingness to help, their genuine belief that different species could work together as equals. His grandfather had called them idealistic. Now, Haiyan Wu wondered if humanity had simply been naive. They had believed in the council's ideals, had thought they were building something meaningful together. They had been willing to sacrifice for that dream, and the council had taken everything they offered while giving back almost nothing in return. 6 months after the departure, the council was falling apart. Every session devolved into accusations and arguments. Member species were starting to question whether the alliance was worth maintaining. The Vrin Trade Guild accused the Melfera of deliberately blocking relief efforts during the Kepler Plague. Out of commercial jealousy, the Melfera countered that Vrin merchants had been systematically underpaying human workers for decades. The Keth, usually so calm, admitted they had voted against every human proposal for council reform because they feared human efficiency would diminish their own influence. Hai and Wu watched the council destroy itself and knew they needed answers. Real answers from someone who understood the human perspective. There was only one option. Commander Minji had been a human officer assigned to Council Security Forces. She had married a Vrin engineer and chosen to stay behind when humanity departed. She was the only human in Council space who would speak to them. The rest had left or, like her husband reported, refused all contact with Council representatives. She entered the Council chamber in full uniform, walking with precise military bearing. Her face showed no emotion as she stood before the assembled representatives. Haiyan Wu had known her slightly before, had always found her professional and competent. Now she looked at the council with something cold in her eyes. The Melfera ambassador spoke first. Commander Minji, we thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We hope you can help us understand why humanity left so abruptly. We considered them friends and partners. Minji's expression did not change. Did you? The question hung in the air. The Vrin representative shifted uncomfortably. Of course we did. Humanity was a valued member of the council for 70 years. Valued for what? Minji asked quietly. For our labor? Our protection? Our willingness to do what you would not? The Keth ambassador's crystals pulsed. That is unfair. The council operates on principles of mutual cooperation. All members contribute according to their abilities. Minji pulled out a datapad. I have numbers. During our 70 years in the council, humans responded to 42 member emergencies. We sent aid every single time, usually within hours. We never debated, never formed committees, never questioned whether it was cost-effective. We just helped. She looked up. The council experienced 73 emergencies during that same period. For 31 of those, humans were not called. I understand that. Some were internal matters or required specific expertise. But for the other 42, we came when asked. Now let me tell you about human emergencies during those 70 years. We experienced 19 major disasters. Plagues, famines, industrial accidents, natural disasters. We requested council aid for 12 of them. The council responded with meaningful help exactly twice. The council chamber was silent. No one seemed to know what to say. Min-G continued, her voice still level and controlled. You want to know when we decided to leave? I can tell you exactly when. It was not a slow decision. It was one moment. One incident that made us finally understand what we meant to you. She pulled up a file on the main screen. 4 years ago, the colony ship Serenity suffered catastrophic system failures in the Deneb sector. Engine failure, life support failing, over 3,000 people on board. They sent distress calls for 36 hours. The screen showed the distress signal propagation map. Red lines spread out from the Serenity's position, reaching multiple council vessels. 4 council ships received those transmissions. The Vrin transport Golden Wing was 6 hours away. The Melfera Science vessel Deep Explorer was 8 hours away. The Keth cruiser Crystal Dawn was 10 hours away. The Vrin patrol ship Swift Hunter was 12 hours away. Minji's voice remained steady, but Hinwu could see her hands clenched at her sides. All 4 vessels acknowledged receiving the distress call. All 4 continued on their scheduled routes. Assisting was not mission critical, you see. They had schedules to maintain, cargo to deliver, surveys to complete. A human mining vessel, the Far Reach, picked up the signal 30 hours after transmission. They were 3 days away at maximum burn. They came anyway, pushing their engines past safety limits. They arrived too late. The Serenity's life support had failed 6 hours earlier. 3,214 people died. 862 of them were children. The silence in the chamber was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. The council held an inquiry, Minji continued. The 4 captains who ignored the distress call were cleared of wrongdoing. They had followed regulations. Responding to distress calls was voluntary unless directly ordered by council command. They had not been ordered. Therefore, they bore no responsibility. The council issued a formal statement of condolences. You sent flowers to the memorial service. The Secretary General gave a beautiful speech about the tragedy of loss and the courage of those who died. Minji looked around the chamber. Do you know what you did not do? You did not change the regulations. You did not make distress call response mandatory. You did not discipline the captains. You did nothing except say you were sorry. That was when we understood. We were not partners to you. We were not equals. We were the species that responded to distress calls while yours debated whether it was convenient. We were the ones who helped while you calculated costs and benefits. The Vrin ambassador tried to speak. Commander, that incident was reviewed thoroughly. The captains followed proper procedures. Proper procedures? Minji's voice rose for the first time, cracking with emotion. 3,000 people screamed for help for a day and a half, and your proper procedures let them die. She took a breath, forced herself back under control. After that, humanity's leadership met privately. We asked ourselves what we were doing here. We looked at 70 years of history and finally saw the pattern. We gave everything. You took everything. And you thought that was normal. That was just how things worked. We did not leave in anger, she said quietly. We left in clarity. We finally understood. The council did not value us. You valued what we did for you. And the moment we stopped being useful, you would discard us like you discarded the 3,000 people on the Serenity. Haiyan Wu felt shame burning in his chest. She was right. Everything she said was right. Minji turned to leave, then paused. You asked why we left without explanation. Here is your answer. What would have been the point? 70 years of actions showed us exactly what you thought of us. Words would not have changed anything. She walked out, and no one tried to stop her. The council tried to move forward, but the galaxy had other plans. Without humans, systems that had worked smoothly for decades began to fail in ways both large and small. The jump gate network was dying. Gates required constant calibration, adjustment of quantum field generators, replacement of worn components. Human engineers had made it look easy, performing maintenance during scheduled downtimes with minimal disruption. They had developed shortcuts and techniques over decades of experience. Council engineers had the technical manuals, but manuals could not replace experience. A gate shutdown that humans completed in 4 hours now took 3 days. Gates that had operated at 98% reliability now functioned at 70%. Travel times across council space increased by 40%. Then the Arcturus gate suffered a catastrophic failure. The quantum containment field collapsed during a jump, trapping a passenger liner between dimensions. 240 souls were lost, frozen in a space that was neither here nor there. Unable to live or die. The council's best engineers studied the failure for weeks. They eventually restored the gate, but admitted they did not fully understand what had gone wrong or how to prevent it from happening again. Human engineers had possessed an intuitive understanding of the systems that the council could not replicate. After Arcturus, Traffic through the jump gates dropped by half. People were afraid. The network that had connected the galaxy was becoming a risk that many were unwilling to take. Tae-Yang, a young diplomat assigned to the recovery committee, spent his days trying to contact humanity. He sent messages through every channel he could find. Formal diplomatic communiques, personal appeals, scientific exchange offers, trade proposals, cultural exchange programs. Every message went answered. Not rejected, just ignored. The silence was worse than refusal. Long-range sensors showed that humans had established a defensive perimeter around their core systems. Automated defense platforms challenged any non-human vessel that approached. The warnings were polite but firm. Turn back or be fired upon. Several Council ships had tested the perimeter. The human weapons were still far more advanced than Council technology. No one tested twice. Tae-Yang's intelligence team gathered what information they could. What they learned was disturbing. Humanity was thriving. Their economy was growing faster without the Council than it had within. They had open trade relations with 3 independent species that the Council had rejected for membership, calling them too primitive or too aggressive or too different. These species seemed happy to trade with humans. The Broken Stone clans, fierce warriors the Council had feared. The Singing Swarms, hive-minded beings the Council had found disturbing. The Deep Watchers, ancient and strange beings from the ocean worlds. Humans did not seem bothered by differences. They traded fairly, learned new languages, adapted to new cultures. They were building a new network of allies, one based on mutual respect rather than hierarchies and regulations. Meanwhile, the Council was tearing itself apart. The Vrin economy had collapsed. Their art markets had depended on human buyers who appreciated their work and paid well for it. Other species bought Vrin art, but saw it as exotic novelty rather than valuable culture. Prices dropped by 80%. Unemployment in the Vrin creative sectors reached 60%. Riots broke out in the Vrin capital. The government deployed security forces, which only made things worse. Vrin society had been peaceful for centuries. Now, there was violence in the streets, and they did not know how to handle it. The Melthera faced different problems. Their economy had been built on financial services and complex trade networks. With jump gates unreliable and trade routes dangerous, that network was collapsing. Melthera banks began failing. The government had to step in with emergency support, but that meant raising taxes, which sparked its own protests. The Keth, usually so stable, discovered that their research programs had depended heavily on human collaboration. 40% of their active projects had included human scientists. Those projects were now stalled or abandoned. Graduate students, who had expected to work with human mentors, found their careers in ruins. Worst of all was the security situation. Without human peacekeepers, border disputes that had simmered quietly for years erupted into violence. The Vrin and Melthera had a territorial disagreement over the Betelgeuse cluster. When trade was flowing and both sides were prosperous, they had been willing to share. Now, desperate for resources, both claimed exclusive rights. Shooting started. Small skirmishes at first, then larger engagements. Council mediators tried to negotiate, but neither side would back down. They needed those resources too badly. The Keth offered to mediate, but both sides rejected them, accusing the Keth of favoritism. The conflict escalated. Ships were destroyed. Colonies were bombarded. Thousands died in the first month of fighting. Haiyan Wu watched in horror as the Vrin-Melthera War spread. Other species took sides. Old grievances resurfaced. The Council, which had maintained peace for 300 years, seemed powerless to stop the violence. He understood now what humanity had provided. It was not just their technology, or their protection, or their economic contribution. It was their presence. Humans had been the neutral party. the species everyone trusted to be fair. When disputes arose, human mediators had resolved them. Their reputation for integrity had given them authority that the Council's own institutions lacked. Without humans, the Council had no moral center. No one trusted anyone else. Every proposal was viewed through the lens of factional advantage. Nothing could get done. Tae Yang came to Haiyan Wu's office one evening, exhausted from another day of sending unanswered messages. "They are never coming back, are they?" The young diplomat asked. Haiyan Wu looked at the star maps showing the human defensive perimeter, the trade routes with their new allies, the growing strength of their independent civilization. "No," he said quietly. "They are not. We taught them that they could not trust us. That is a lesson they learned well." Tae Yang slumped in his chair. "What do we do now?" "We bear the cost," Haiyan Wu said. "We rebuild what we broke. We learn to function without them. And we hope that someday, when we have proven ourselves worthy, they might consider talking to us again. Will that day ever come?" Haiyan Wu looked at the chaos spreading across council space, the wars and economic collapse and failing infrastructure. He thought about the Serenity, about the Kepler Plague, about 70 years of taking humanity for granted. "I do not know," he admitted. "But we owe them the effort to become better than we were, even if they never see it." 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council stood on the edge of complete dissolution. The alliance that had united dozens of species for 3 centuries was dying. The Vrin-Melthor War had spread. The Keth had been drawn in when Melthor forces attacked the Keth mining colony they claimed was supporting the Vrin. 3 species, once peaceful partners, were now locked in a conflict that grew worse each day. Smaller species were withdrawing from the Council entirely. They had joined for protection and economic opportunity. Now the Council offered neither. Better to be neutral and safe than allied and targeted. Council revenue had dropped by 70%. Member contributions were late or missing entirely. The central government could barely pay its own staff. Offices were closing. Programs were being abandoned. The infrastructure humanity had built and maintained continued to decay. Another jump gate had failed, this one, thankfully, while not in use. Engineers recommended shutting down a third of the network for safety reasons. That would isolate entire sectors, cutting them off from the rest of Council space. Haiyan Wu sat in his empty office. Looking at reports, he barely had the energy to read. The recovery committee had been disbanded. There was nothing to recover. Humanity had made their choice clear through continued silence. He had one last idea, one final attempt. Not because he thought it would work, but because he needed to try. He requisitioned a small, unarmed shuttle and filed a flight plan to the human border. His staff tried to talk him out of it. The council leadership said it was pointless. He went anyway. The journey took 3 weeks through deteriorating jump gates and dangerous space. Pirates had grown bold. Several times his shuttle sensors detected unknown vessels, but Haiyan Wu was lucky. They found richer targets. When he reached the human perimeter, automated defenses immediately locked onto his ship. A synthesized voice issued the standard warning. "You have entered human space. Turn back immediately. Any vessel continuing past this point will be fired upon without further warning." Haiyan Wu brought his shuttle to a full stop. Powered down weapon systems he did not have, and opened a communication channel. "My name is Haiyan Wu. I am an ambassador from the Galactic Council. I am not here on official business. I am here as one person speaking to other people. I know you do not want to hear from us. I understand why. But please, just listen for a moment." No response. His sensors showed the defense platforms still tracking his ship, weapons charged and ready. "I have spent the past year learning about everything the Council did to humanity. Every slight, every betrayal, every time we failed you. I know about the Serenity. I know about the Kepler Plague. I know about the 70 years of taking everything you gave and returning almost nothing." He paused, struggling with emotions he had kept buried for months. "I want to say that I am sorry. Not as a representative of the Council. As a person. As someone whose species benefited from your generosity while never truly appreciating it. We treated you like servants. We took your sacrifices for granted. We valued what you did for us, but never valued you." Still silence. But the weapons had not fired. He took that as permission to continue. "The Council is falling apart. I think you know that. We are reaping what we sowed. The peace you helped maintain is gone. The infrastructure you built is failing. The prosperity we all shared is disappearing. We are learning, very painfully, exactly how much we depended on you. But this message is not asking you to save us. We do not deserve that. This is simply an acknowledgement that you were right to leave. You deserve better than what we gave you. Your people, your sacrifices, your belief in a community of equals, it all deserved better." Haiyan Wu felt tears on his face and did not wipe them away. "I hope you find what you are looking for out there, among species who will appreciate what you offer. I hope you build something better than what we had. You deserve that. You deserved it all along." He closed the channel, turned his shuttle around, and began the long journey back to Council space. He did not expect a response. There was none. 3 weeks later, he returned to find the situation had worsened. The Vrin government had collapsed in a military coup. The Melthra homeworld had suffered a terrorist attack. The Keth were considering withdrawing from the Council entirely. Haiyan Wu delivered his final report to what remained of the Council leadership. A dozen representatives gathered in the chamber that had once held hundreds. "Humanity will not return," he told them. "We need to accept that and move forward. We must rebuild everything ourselves. The infrastructure, the defense networks, the trade systems. It will cost 10 times what we paid humans. It will take decades. Many of our current systems will fail before we can replace them. But we have no choice." The Vrin military representative interrupted. "This is unacceptable. We should demand that humanity fulfill their treaty obligations." "They have no treaty obligations," Haiyan Wu said flatly. "They withdrew legally, following every protocol. And even if they had not, what would you do? Attack them? Their defense systems are more advanced than ours. Their territory is too far away to project force effectively. And we can barely maintain peace among ourselves, much less wage war against a species that was our strongest military partner. Then what do you suggest?" The Melthra representative asked. "We learn to cooperate," Haiyan Wu said. "Actually cooperate. Not as a hierarchy where some species serve and others take, but as true equals. We share burdens fairly. We help each other without counting the cost. We become the kind of alliance that humanity thought they were joining 70 years ago." "That is idealistic," the Keth representative said. "Species naturally pursue their own interests first." "Yes," Haiyan Wu agreed. "And that is exactly what humanity learned from us. We taught them that idealism was foolish, that generosity was weakness, that helping others without demanding equal return was naive. They learned that lesson very well. And now we must live with the consequences of teaching it." He pulled up a final image on the main screen. It was the message humanity had left on their data chip, the formal withdrawal notice. At the bottom was a single line he had not noticed before, buried in the diplomatic language. "We hope you find what you were looking for." "They meant that sincerely," Haiyan Wu said. "Humanity is not cruel. They simply gave us exactly what we wanted. We wanted to be served without gratitude, protected without reciprocation, helped without obligation. We wanted someone to carry the burdens we would not carry ourselves. And now that is exactly what we have." No one to serve us. No one to protect us. No one to help us. We are alone with the costs we created. The humans did not punish us. They simply stopped subsidizing our selfishness. The chamber was quiet. Outside the windows, another jump gate flickered and died, stranding thousands of travelers in deep space. Hyanwu looked at the remaining council members. We have a choice. We can continue fighting each other over scraps, and the council will end. Or we can choose to become better, to build something worth preserving. Not for humanity's sake, they have moved on. For our own sake, will becoming better bring them back? Someone asked. No, Hyanwu said honestly. Probably not. But it might make us into the kind of species that deserved their partnership in the first place. And perhaps that is what we should have been all along. He gathered his things and left the chamber. He had said what needed to be said. What the council did with it was no longer his concern. That night, alone in his quarters, Hyanwu thought about his grandfather's stories. The old man had called humans friends. He had valued their partnership beyond economics or utility. He had genuinely mourned when they left. Perhaps that was the real lesson. Humanity had not left because of any single catastrophic event. They had left because after 70 years, they realized that almost no one in the council felt about them the way Hyanwu's grandfather had. Almost no one had valued the friendship itself. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. Humanity would find their place in it, with species who appreciated what they offered. The council would rebuild or it would fall. Either way, the cost of their choices would be paid. Without a word, the humans had departed. In their silence, they had said everything that mattered.